Okay, so this is a bit of an oddball job. I'm going to make this display cart for a piece of concrete, which is a sample of concrete for underfloor heating for a company, and this display cart's going to go around to various kind of home show, home expo type things. I was meant to have 2 weeks for this build, but because of a huge delay getting this walnut plywood, I ended up having 4 days, so I'm just crazy getting this job done. This edging is 2mm thick, solid walnut. It's pre-glued. It's too thick to go through my little edge bander, but heat gun works just fine. Although it's a bit slower, that actually worked very well. And I'm doing this to give the miters a little bit of beef, to give them a bit of protection on the corners, instead of just having a mitered veneer. And it seemed to work pretty good. So I need to trim off that walnut edging that's hanging over the panel. So I've got a flush trim bearing bit here, and that bearing is flush with this leading. The bearing is flush with this fence, and then I have another fence come on the front, which has a cutout for the excess on the other side. Put a placeholder in there, and what it's doing is keeping me plumb while I trim off the excess there. Put it in place. So this is really the start of the first mistake on this job. That triangle should have been quite a bit bigger, and while I was planning to use that offcut for the lid and have a nice grain matched side, it just wasn't going to be big enough, but I don't know that yet. So added some rebates for the bottom panel to sit into, and then I could domino the corners of the main carcass. So I placed the bottom panel in during the glue up, mainly just to keep things square. So I just added a couple of screws at this point just to hold it in place, and then we could start trying to put clamps on it, which turned out to be a little bit frantic, but this is the end result, which seemed to work. Right, so this is another mistake, and I don't know it yet, but it's really to do with those triangles again. Just measurements weren't quite right, and I'm really just rushing things here. But this is meant to be the start of the lid of the box. Then I could edge it all with the 2mm walnut again. And with the glue dry on the main carcass, I was able to finish screwing in the base panel and then add some wheels. So I've got a really small crack, kind of gap along here, and some little kind of feathery edges where the sharp point has come together. So what I'm going to do is I've mixed up some kind of brownish bog just with some black oxide and some pink kind of filler. Then back onto the lid, I could start dominoing what I needed to there. I ended up needing to use the very wide slot in the large top panel, and this allowed me to actually slide everything together in one go. You can see there at the bottom of the screen the wider slots in that panel. Now I'm choosing to use epoxy here because of those wide slots. I could fill them with epoxy, so once the panel is in place, any excess gap around the domino is kind of filled with epoxy, and it actually is kind of working. Alright, so this has come out the next morning and we're pretty good. It's fitting on the carcass pretty nicely. I need to clean up these corners. I just thought I'd mention at this point, the piece I was working on just about all day, two of these triangles, were the wrong size. It's a bit tricky to see with it sitting the way it is. I'll set the right one. Oh. This is the right one. It ended up being that I was 18 mil short. So after spending the better part of 4 hours making these two triangles, they were wrong. So last thing in the day yesterday, I made up these. I didn't have time to put the 2mm edging on, so I've just mitered them straight. And I think what I'm going to do is route a rebate around the corners and inlay a small piece of solid walnut just to give it a bit more protection. Which actually seems easier than doing the 2mm edging on there. So anyway, I can carry on today and see if I can get this thing almost finished. If you're wondering, the inside of the plywood is beech, and it's just a cheaper way to order the special veneered plies. It costs way less to have one side with a good face and the back side with a cheaper veneer. After all, this is just a commercial product. It's not going to be sitting in anyone's living room. This is just a very practical kind of solution to hold a piece of concrete. So I could test fit the lid finally, and it was pretty good. Slightly out, but close enough for my purposes. You can see on the right hand side there's a piece missing, and that was my next challenge. I tried a few times to cut the shape required. It was a very strange piece to cut, but managed it in the end. And this is another bad idea. For some reason, it just made a terrible cut doing it this way, that putting the rebates around on the lid. So I ended up having to increase the size of the rebate to get rid of some of the tear out I had, and do it by hand with my small router. Once it was done, I could then glue in some pieces. I ended up being 4 or 3 by 4mm pieces. And we had to try and figure out how to get the piece of concrete into the unit. It's about 80 kilos, so not stupendously light. You can see there I added a cleat onto the wall of the unit on the inside. The concrete will sit on that. And then I could add a third little support cleat in the middle of the concrete. So I had cut and edged some doors and drilling the holes for the hinges, and these are some special hinges by Blum. They're called zero protrusion hinges, and they are made for mitered door edges. They're a bit tricky to use, so you definitely need to do a couple of test goes on where the mounting holes need to be drilled. The biggest takeaway from using these is that the pieces need to be absolutely square. Everything needs to be square. While there is adjustment, the adjustment affects how well the edge looks, and so it can be very difficult to get a nice kind of invisible door corner. So this is pretty risky flushing down the inlays with the router, because I'm actually just referencing off the inlay and not the top. So, but it was a very quick way to get the job done, and that's what I needed, so that's why I'm doing that. And these are some pretty snazzy hinges. Quick little quick release there, and practical for this purpose. I don't know exactly what else I would use them for because they're pretty bulky, but in this case it was exactly what I needed. And I'm just using some paracord as a stay for the lid. So I've just got it tied off inside the unit, and then I can add a small eyelet onto the lid and work out how long a piece of cord I need. Very basic stay. And on to the clear coat. I'm using water-based finish here mainly because it dries super quick, especially in our weather at the moment. I was able to get 3 coats on in a day and then deliver it the next day. So that was it. It's all done. It's a bit of a weird oddball project, but maybe somebody can get something out of it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.